Welcome back to our channel. Today we're addressing a deeply complex and often misunderstood topic, addiction. What drives compulsive behavior and how does it relate to our notions of free will? Addiction raises fundamental questions about human nature, morality, and autonomy. In this video, we'll explore the philosophical perspectives on addiction, examining the nature of compulsion, the role of choice, and the ethical implications. Let's dive into this intricate subject and uncover the deeper meanings behind addiction. Section 1, defining addiction. What is addiction? Addiction is typically characterized by compulsive engagement in rewarding stimuli despite adverse consequences. This behavior is often associated with substance use, such as drugs or alcohol, but can also apply to activities like gambling, eating, or even the use of technology. The biological perspective. From a biological standpoint, addiction is seen as a chronic disease that affects the brain's reward, motivation, and memory systems. It involves changes in brain chemistry that create cravings and reinforce compulsive behaviors, making it difficult for individuals to control their actions. The psychological perspective. Psychologically, addiction can be understood as a response to stress, trauma, or emotional pain. It often involves a cycle of relief-seeking behavior followed by guilt and a desire to escape unpleasant feelings, perpetuating the cycle of addiction. Section 2, philosophical theories of addiction. Compulsion versus free will. One of the central philosophical debates about addiction revolves around the concepts of compulsion and free will. Are individuals with addiction truly in control of their actions, or are they compelled by forces beyond their control? Determinism and addiction. Determinists argue that human behavior, including addiction, is determined by prior causes such as genetics, environment, and neurobiology. From this perspective, individuals with addiction may lack genuine free will as their actions are the result of deterministic factors beyond their control. Libertarian free will. Libertarians, on the other hand, assert that individuals possess free will and the ability to make choices independent of deterministic influences. According to this view, people with addiction still have the capacity to choose differently and are morally responsible for their actions. Compatibilism. Compatibilists offer a middle ground, suggesting that free will and determinism can coexist. They argue that while certain factors may influence behavior, individuals still have the capacity for self-control and moral responsibility. This perspective acknowledges the role of external influences while maintaining that people can exercise agency within certain constraints. Philosophical perspectives on compulsion. Philosophers have long debated the nature of compulsion and its implications for moral responsibility. What does it mean to act compulsively, and how does this affect our judgment of someone's actions? Harry Frankfurt's hierarchical model. Philosopher Harry Frankfurt proposed a hierarchical model of free will, distinguishing between first-order desires, basic impulses, and second-order desires, reflective desires about our impulses. According to Frankfurt, addiction involves a conflict between these levels, where individuals may have a first-order desire to engage in addictive behavior, but a second-order desire to resist it. True freedom, in Frankfurt's view, involves aligning these levels, achieving harmony between one's reflective and basic desires. Susan Wolf's reason view. Susan Wolf introduced the reason view, which suggests that moral responsibility requires the ability to act in accordance with reasons. For individuals with addiction, the compulsion to use substances may undermine their capacity to respond to rational considerations, challenging their moral responsibility. However, Wolf also argues that recovery and rehabilitation can restore this capacity, highlighting the potential for change and growth. Section 3, the ethics of addiction. Moral responsibility and blame. The question of moral responsibility in addiction is complex and multifaceted. To what extent should individuals with addiction be held accountable for their actions, and how should society respond to their behavior? Blame and compassion. Some argue that individuals with addiction should be held accountable for their actions, emphasizing personal responsibility and the importance of making different choices. Others advocate for a more compassionate approach, recognizing the influence of external factors and the challenges of overcoming addiction. This perspective emphasizes empathy, support, and rehabilitation rather than blame and punishment. Stigma and moral judgments. The stigma associated with addiction often involves moral judgments that can hinder recovery and perpetuate suffering. Philosophers and ethicists call for a reevaluation of these judgments, advocating for a more understanding and supportive approach that addresses the root causes of addiction and promotes healing. Treatment and autonomy. The ethics of treatment for addiction also raise important questions about autonomy and consent. How should we balance the need for effective treatment with respect for individual autonomy? Voluntary versus involuntary treatment. Voluntary treatment respects the autonomy of individuals with addiction, allowing them to seek help on their own terms. However, in some cases, individuals may lack the capacity to make informed decisions due to the nature of their addiction. Involuntary treatment, while potentially more effective in some cases, raises ethical concerns about autonomy and coercion. Harm reduction versus abstinence. Harm reduction approaches focus on minimizing the negative consequences of addictive behavior rather than insisting on complete abstinence. This approach respects individual autonomy and acknowledges the challenges of achieving total abstinence. Conversely, abstinence-based models prioritize complete cessation of addictive behavior, often based on moral or health considerations. Balancing these approaches requires careful ethical consideration and sensitivity to individual needs. Section 4, Addiction and Society. Social and cultural influences. Addiction is not only an individual issue, but also a social and cultural one. How do societal factors contribute to addiction, and what responsibilities do we have as a society to address these influences? Social determinants of addiction. Socioeconomic status, education, community support, and cultural norms all play significant roles in the development and perpetuation of addiction. Addressing these social determinants requires a comprehensive approach that includes policy changes, community support, and education. Cultural attitudes towards addiction. Cultural attitudes towards addiction can either support or hinder recovery. Stigmatizing views and punitive approaches can exacerbate the challenges faced by individuals with addiction, while compassionate and supportive attitudes can promote healing and reintegration. Policy and ethical considerations. The ethics of addiction policy involve balancing public health, individual rights, and social justice. What are the most ethical and effective ways to address addiction on a societal level? Criminalization versus decriminalization. The criminalization of substance use often leads to punitive measures that disproportionately affect marginalized communities and fail to address the root causes of addiction. Decriminalization and the implementation of public health approaches prioritize treatment, support, and harm reduction over punishment, aiming to reduce the negative impacts of addiction on individuals and society. Access to treatment and support. Ensuring access to effective treatment and support is a fundamental ethical consideration in addressing addiction. This includes providing affordable and comprehensive health care, mental health services, and community support programs that address the diverse needs of individuals with addiction. Conclusion. In this video, we've explored the philosophy of addiction, examining the nature of compulsion, the role of free will, and the ethical implications of addiction. Understanding addiction from a philosophical perspective can deepen our empathy and inform more compassionate and effective approaches to treatment and support. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the philosophy of addiction. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more enlightening content on philosophy and ethics. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep striving for a more compassionate world.